Robert Mugabe has been given until noon tomorrow to tender his resignation or face impeachment. Now, the country's governing party announcing earlier today at following a special meeting in Harare. Grace Mugabe, the wife of a president, has also been expelled from the party, and former Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa has been nominated as the country's new leader. For reaction on this, we're now joined here in the studio by businessman and former University of Zimbabwe SRC President Terry Mungu, but also by General Secretary of Zimbabwe's Communist Party Ngabuto Mabena, and ENCA as Africa editor Mike Siluma. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thanks very much for joining us. Well, let me throw it wide open. Your take on those pronouncements, Mike?
I think that what this does say is that the train is moving very fast. The train to remove
over the past 48 hours.
Yeah, it's gaining speed, and it's not going to be reversible. It's inexorable, and I think that I would say that there clearly is no interest in having a stopover in getting to the destination. So clearly by this timetable, it means that by tomorrow noon, Robert Mugabe will need to have resigned, failing which probably in the next day or two he will be impeached.
Terry?
I think clearly the army pronounced, gave the president a red line, crossed that red line, process is irreversible, messages being sent to Gaborone, to the SADC group, that this process is not going to be reversed at all. This is not an effort to sanitize what's happening. This is clearly a very well thought out strategy to bring constitutionality to a process which began in what a whole lot of us felt was a difficult terrain, an uncharted terrain by all means, particularly in this era. So I think that's the most critical point we need to all acknowledge. Emmerson Mnangagwa will be Zimbabwe's interim president, and there will be a transitional government, and a lot of work has gone into this whole process, and you know, we need to take our hats off to the defense forces and those behind this very elegant coup d'etat.
Well, I think it pulls the card from SADC and other regional leaders like your AU to say this has moved from being a military operation, as it were. It is now an internal issue, and the SADC now cannot have an entry point to go in. In the last 48 hours, the discussion was that this is whether it's a military coup, a bond coup, a soft coup, it is now an internal matter, a ZANU-PF internal matter, which now needs to be dealt internally. So there's no room now, in our view, for SADC to interfere. So they ought now to support the internal process that is going on.
Now, it's interesting you're saying internal, because just reading from the speeches that were made, it does look like more of a ZANU-PF trying to redeem itself. Very little talk about what needs to happen next and who it's going to involve and how. If you look at statements like, for example, we need to position war veterans, make sure that they are in positions of power, suspending and banning people from the organizations. It looks like a ZANU-PF issue.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that it has to be a ZANU-PF issue in the first place, because it is important. Remember, ZANU has had its eruptions within itself, which culminated in what we're sitting, you know, with the withdrawal of the president, the expulsion of a whole lot of people. So it needs to consolidate.
You mean as an entry point?
The faction, the Mnangagwa faction in ZANU has to consolidate its position, and it needs to clear out the people who would have been on basically the Lacoste, the so-called Lacoste. They need by definition to consolidate their position in ZANU-PF. before they can engage other parties, before they can engage even the likes of SADC, if ever SADC do happen to have an entry point, that it is important for the party itself to consolidate, and then it can begin to deal with issues. For example, like I mean, yesterday we were talking a lot about the transitional arrangements, etc. It is impossible for ZANU-PF to enter into those kinds of conversations unless and until it has consolidated itself, or rather the faction that is now on the ascendancy has consolidated itself within the party. So for me, it's perfectly logical that before anything else happens, it is important that because ZANU-PF exerts enormous support on Zimbabwean society, and it is at the I often say that they are like the spider in the web, so the spider has to find its way, find its feet, and then they can decide what kind of future Zimbabwe they would like to see, including what kind of transitional arrangements are going to be put in place.
Terry, how important is it for ZANU-PF to make sure that the tens of thousands of people, yes, may well be a great majority of them are ZANU-PF supporters, but so did the whole range of opposition parties. They marched too yesterday, and regarding this as a moment that needed celebration and that needed support. How important is it for ZANU-PF to make sure that those people are not alienated and very clear signals are sent right from the beginning that they will be part of whatever is going to unfold beyond this point?
I think it's absolutely crucial for the success of this intervention. I think one of the key things that the coup plotters and the organizers of this intervention made clear was that they used telegraph diplomacy. They have sent through a list of the people who are supposed to be part of the presidium, which is inclusive. Going to Dumiso Davengwa, going to Morgan Tsvangirai, to Joyce Mjuru suggests this has to be an all-nation, all hands on the deck exercise.
But from what those people have said over the past couple of days, they hadn't been engaged.
Well, clearly, whoever has been transmitting this information is cognizant of the risk of the divisiveness of Robert Mugabe and Grace. So they would like to make that first amendment to say, should we get Dumiso Davengwa into this process, what outcomes are likely to come out of this transitional government? So while ZANU itself comes from a one-party state mentality, remember, ZANU was really coerced into accepting a multi-party democracy. Even when they did, I mean, the constant persecution of MDC and other opposition members suggested Mugabe and the party were not comfortable in the kind of democratic environment that I think we all believe we ought to be in right now. So I think there's a crucial understanding that this whole process is now a national project. It may be ZANU-PF which created the mess that we are seeing, but it has to become a national project if it is going to be successful from here on.
To what extent, Alan, do you think, Huto, ZANU-PF, in other words, do we have something? Terry has just said that they were in fact dragged kicking and screaming, to that arrangement, which some people argue, by the way, that it didn't work well for the opposition as well. I mean, do you think that they have that topmost in their mind that this is what we would need to do if this process is going to yield any results?
Well, you see, ZANU-PF over the years has been run by the military, and this reformation that we are seeing to deploy war veterans in strategic positions in government and in the parastatals, they will have to go back and a campaign for ZANU-PF. That is a renewal of ZANU-PF or retaining its key constituents, which it has now been losing. You'll realize that since 2015, Mugabe relied on the Youth League to drive the campaign. Secondly, what is important, which they resolved, is to remove the center of power from the presidency. In 2014, the resolution was the center of power in ZANU-PF is Robert Mugabe. Now Chinamasa announces that it has been removed. You are beginning to see some renewal within ZANU-PF, but the biggest challenge that now ZANU-PF faces is how to go forward on the economic front. How do you begin to address the whole economic question? This is where your opposition players come in to say, moving forward, will ZANU-PF, this new ZANU-PF, invite key opposition leaders like Morgan Tsvangirai, Professor Oshimwe Ncube, and others in some kind of a unity government. But I think the point that they are making, even if that were to happen, it remains a ZANU-PF project, a ZANU-PF government, different from what we saw in 2009 to 2013, where it was an inclusive government based on the dispute around the outcome of the 2008 elections. So I'm seeing ZANU-PF opening up to other players to come in, but in a ZANU-PF government.
I'm going to ask all three of you to hold your thoughts right there. We're going to take a very short break. I'll be back with my guests right after this.
Could I get an alcohol-free beer, please?